going long on second down. Throwing for Hamilton, who's got it. 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. Touchdown, Derek Hamilton. That time, there was no touchdown.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 19 of the Nachos and Analysis College Football Show. I'm Drew Archer, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Matthew Johnson. How's it going, Matthew?
It's good. All good over here. How's, I know you've been sick a little bit. How's the new year treating you?
It's been pretty sour since the new year started. Been sick, so I feel like it's been forever since you and I recorded a podcast together. I don't remember when that was, the last episode we did together, but it feels like forever ago.
I think it was that one right before Christmas, I guess. We recorded on like the 23rd or Christmas Eve or something. This is the first time we've recorded a podcast with seeing each other since the last time. Well, I guess the South Carolina game, the preview and post-game episode, we saw each other in between those, but...
Yeah, I feel like it's been a while. Hopefully I'm on the downhill of getting healthy here. But we got college football to talk about, not my health. Second round of playoff games last week, 4 games, some competitive, some not so competitive. I will admit the first one you have here on the list, Matthew, Ohio State, Oregon. I was traveling back from Nashville, and when I checked the score, when I got home, it was halftime, and it was like 31-0 or something like that. I was like, I'm not even bothering turning this football game on.
I don't blame you, because this is probably the one I was most excited about, aside from Notre Dame UGA, of what I was expecting to be the most exciting, because this one was exciting in the early season. As you remember, just to call back to that Dan Lanning coaching play where he got the 12 men on the field penalty on purpose to give Ohio State less time and only one play. Their quarterback didn't know slides with the clock still running. Game ends just like that. So it was very surprising how Ohio State came out and dominated this one. They look unstoppable right now, and I was hesitant to say that after the Tennessee game because I thought Tennessee was a little overrated. So I was still hesitant to say, oh, that win is a good one for Ohio State. But after this Oregon win, it's hard to deny that Ohio State is probably in the best position they've been in 10 years to win a national championship.
They look hot. They've taken care of business both against Oregon and Tennessee. Next up for them, the trip to the Cotton Bowl with Texas. Speaking of Texas and Arizona State. This was the game that I wish I wasn't driving during. I believe this was like the 1 o'clock or noon game, so I missed this game entirely driving back from Nashville. Goes to overtime, but Texas ends up winning 39-31. Clemson won. I was going to try to stop off in Atlanta on the way back through for this game, but didn't have to worry about that with the Clemson loss to Texas.
I don't know anybody that really thought this one was going to be that close. It ended up being an instant classic because the first half, I think Texas goes into halftime leading by 15 or 14, 2 touchdowns at least, and it just Arizona State couldn't get anything moving on either side of the ball. But I was really impressed with how Arizona State was hanging in this game with stopping Texas, which was a lot more in the first half than I thought that was going to happen throughout the game. So although you go into halftime down 14, one of those is a pick six or a defensive touchdown. No, it might have been a kick return. Yeah, it was a kick return touchdown. And then so Texas only scored once on your defense in the first half. So that was a little promising, but it did look like it could quickly get out of hand for Arizona State, and they made an incredible comeback. That's a great year for Arizona State, and it seems like the future is bright for that program because it's like a first or second year head coach. He has a lot of ties to the university. I believe they just got a couple big transfer commits too, so Arizona State's going to be a force for the next couple years.
Yeah, and then it's refreshing. They're kind of one of those teams that, like Boise State and SMU, some refreshing different faces in the college football playoff. The first game of last week's slate, Penn State, Boise State, Nittany Lions get out of this one with a 31-14 victory.
This is just another warm-up game, it seemed like, for Penn State because they're handling business. They had SMU and Boise State, so maybe they had the easiest path to get to the semifinals at least, but it's not going to be easy from here on out. We always talk about the James Franklin factor of if he can win the big game. There's a little bit of evidence now for that, but I don't know that those 2 games qualify as big enough.
Yeah. Another big game pushed due to tragedy in New Orleans there, but the Notre Dame UGA game, and Georgia's just kind of looked lost
very different than the Georgia we've seen throughout the year. I mean, they have had their struggles throughout the year, but they really seemed like this was a team that was putting it together at the right time, aside from the Carson Beck injury. If you listened to last week, you'll know that I thought Gunnar Stockton might be the right move for this offense, but I've never seen a Georgia team get shut down quite like Notre Dame shut down Georgia this past week. So I think they finished the game with like 13 or 20 something rushing yards, which is just insane for a Georgia team.
I think I mentioned in one of the last episodes, Notre Dame, after suffering that early loss to NIU, has consistently and quietly strung together a nice season and 2 wins away from a national championship.
These are going to be the 2 toughest tests for Notre Dame, though, coming up, and they passed the one last week with flying colors.
Speaking of passing with flying colors, if you want to pass with flying colors with top-notch service, reach out to Pump Monkey Septic Service, owned and operated by Clemson alumni Alan Powell. They service the upstate of South Carolina. Septic issues are not issues that you want to have on your hands, so give them a call at 864-710-2211. They're on Facebook and Instagram, and again, they service the upstate of South Carolina, so give them a call, 864-710-2211. When the dump's funky, call Pump Monkey.
All right, so continuing a segment I kind of started last week is just kind of keeping up with the offseason updates for the Clemson football team so far. Since then, we have had a couple announced returns, big on the offensive side. I know last week we talked about TJ Parker and Peter Woods both committing to come back next year, but big news on the offensive front this week with Cade Klubnik, Antonio Williams, tackle Blake Miller, and another offensive lineman, Tristan Lee, all saying that they're coming back to Clemson for another season next year. That's really big to have probably your 2 best offensive linemen and maybe your 2 most talented offensive weapons all committing to come back. Also, on the portal note, we had talked about Troy Stellato. I don't think we mentioned on any episodes that Noble Johnson, a redshirt freshman wide receiver, has announced that he was transferring. I think it was kind of mid-season, so we probably just missed it. But he has committed to Arizona State, which we were just talking about has a bright future ahead. Also, we talked a little bit about Sherrod Koval entering the transfer portal at junior safety. He's committed to Virginia Tech now. And last week, we only had the news that A.J. Hoffler, redshirt freshman defensive end, had announced his intent to transfer. But as of this moment, he has committed to go to Georgia Tech, which is new news to us. And then the last transfer news, this one was a bit of a surprise to me, but as a grad transfer, it makes a little bit of sense. Trey Williams, number 8, big defensive lineman for Clemson, has announced his intent to transfer to Michigan. So that's a big get for the Wolverines there.
And I will say, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw on Twitter earlier this morning that Troy Stellato committed to Kentucky. I don't think I'm making that up. I'm pretty sure I saw that.
That sounds like it could be right, but I would have expected him to go to like a big market. He seems like the type of guy that likes a lot of attention, so I thought he would go to like a big market school. And then we also had a segment of transferring in, which nothing really has changed here. We still have Tristan Smith, the Southeastern Missouri wide receiver, and Will Held, the defensive end from Purdue. But I think this news is new today. Another big transfer portal get for Clemson. Jeremiah Alexander, edge rusher out of Alabama, committed to Clemson today. He is also former high school teammates with Peter Woods, which might have had to do with his recruitment to come here. That's a really big one. I think I read Clemson with the Jeremiah Alexander edition is in the top 20 of transfers taken in like their average rating, like their PFF grade. Clemson is in the top 20 of like transfers bringing in the top transfers. So not a lot of transfers brought in, but more than I would have expected really. And some actually big name players, some big time portal gets there for the Tigers.
Yeah, and Jeremiah Alexander, I was reading up on him today. Clemson recruited him pretty heavily coming out of high school. The Tigers were competing against Auburn and one other SEC school I can't think of off the top of my head for transfer, but I think he was on campus this past weekend, and I think that Peter Woods and that former relationship when they were recruiting him in high school probably helped getting him here.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the terms were that led to his transferring, maybe if it was just playing time or anything like that, but I'm excited to have some new faces into the Clemson program. And finally, we got to change. I mean, not finally, it only was like this for 1 week, but I had the category still not fired. It has been changed to fired, and the name in that category is still Wes Goodwin. So I think that news came out 1 or 2 nights ago that Dabo met with Wes Goodwin and decided that it was best for the team to move in another direction. There's not any news on any like people coming in for interviews or what direction Dabo's going. I watched Ryan Cantor, a friend of the show. He put up a YouTube video yesterday or the day before, kind of just going over different wish list items for DCs. So that's a good video if you want to go check that one out. It has a lot of information about potential hires there.
I might need to go watch that because somebody was asking me who do I want for defensive coordinator, and I was like, to be totally honest with you, defensive coordinator is not something I've really had to think about much at Clemson because prior to Wes Goodwin, we had Brent Venables, and we just never had to worry about our defense. I wasn't paying attention to other D coordinators out there, so I might need to go educate myself with Ryan's video.
This name was not in the video, but it just came to my mind that maybe there's some way Dabo can swing bringing Mike Vrabel to.
Yeah. I hear he's looking for a job,
but he might get the Patriots job. I would think.
Be on a very short leash because Mayo only got 1 year.
That's a different story.
Fact or fiction?
Fact or fiction. And when I wrote this one out, I was considering all the pieces to the offensive puzzle that Clemson has returning next year. But fact or fiction, Clemson opens the season as a top 10 team in 2025.
I'm saying fact, and it might not seem that way in the moment, but I think Clemson ended these last 2 seasons on a lot of momentum. You ended last season with 5 or 6 straight wins. Didn't win the conference, but you still win your bowl game. This year, it seems a little rockier because you lost to South Carolina. You immediately follow that up, though, with an ACC championship win and a playoff appearance. So I feel like the momentum is moving in the right direction for the program right now, which I haven't been able to say since 2020 when Trevor Lawrence was still under center. So I would be surprised if Clemson was outside of the top 10.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to say fact as well. I think with the way that Cade has shown that he can continue to improve and just the offensive weapons he has coming around him, the experienced offensive line that you have returning in a second year under Coach Luke, and then all those offensive weapons, whether it be on the perimeter or in the running back room, I think Clemson will definitely be a top 10 preseason team. Fact or fiction, Ohio State's defense has shown vulnerabilities this season that Texas's offense is well equipped to exploit.
I think it's obviously a fact, but Ohio State is, like I mentioned earlier, peaking at the right time. They're really putting it all together when it matters the most. So I think that matchup is going to decide the game of Texas's offense versus Ohio State's defense. I think Ohio State's offense is kind of primed to run through Texas's defense. It's just if Texas's offense is going to be able to keep up. But Texas does have the most speed than Ohio State will have seen all year, so it'll be interesting. I'm excited about that one.
I'm going to say fiction here. And it might be to what you were saying, how Ohio State's just peaking at the right time, but I don't think there's a better team in college football right now than Ohio State, and I think Ohio State's going to win this game. Fact or fiction, the 2024-25 college football playoff is the most entertaining in history.
I am going fact again for this one. I personally have been loving the 12-team playoff. Not every game has been, down to the wire, but not every game in the 4-team playoff was down to the wire. You had blowouts in the 4-team playoff in the championship game with the Georgia TCU one, Clemson over Alabama in 2018. There's been blowouts in championship history. I think that's just the nature of the game. I don't think that should deter us from continuing down this 12-team playoff path because I've been excited about all the matchups. You get new matchups, renewing old rivalries. I think that this is the best iteration of the playoffs that we've ever had.
Yeah, I agree. I say fact as well. I've enjoyed it. You're getting matchups you don't normally see. You're getting more football. People were losing their mind when Alabama or potentially South Carolina got left out. Now you're looking at this playoff and there's only one SEC team left and they've only been a member of the conference for 6 months. There's a lot of parity in college football. I think this is going to continue to be that way with the transfer portal. You could potentially see just different teams shuffling in and out of this 12-team playoff every year, but I've enjoyed it. You've gotten some teams you wouldn't ordinarily see in a 4-team playoff, and there's been some good games, so I agree. I'm going to say fact here.
Weekly picks.
All right, time to review week 17 of our Pick'em contest, coming down to the end of things here. Honestly, we got this week's picks and then the national championships picks, and we're wrapping it up for the year. The way it shook out last week, Matthew earned 2 points, moving his season total to 41 plus 7 preseason points. I went a perfect 4-0 this past week, moving me to 44 points with 6 preseason points.
Which my 7th preseason pick happened in between recording last week's episode and this week's episode. I recorded that episode on a Monday, and then that Monday afternoon, the Missouri Bowl game happened, and they came out on top to get to 10 wins. Their over-under was 9.5 that I picked the over for, so that's why I have 7 there now. But it doesn't seem like it's helping me out because my national champion pick from the preseason is now out, and Drew's is still in. So I think we decided that 2 points if you guess preseason national champion right.
Yeah, I believe so.
So that's not looking very good for me. I hope anybody but Ohio State wins.
And you mentioned Missouri. Their bowl game was in Nashville, and when we were out on Broadway Monday night, the Missouri fans were out in full force. And it was also funny, too, because they played Iowa, and you could spot an Iowa person, just super polite Midwestern people, like they bump your shoulder like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh.
But a lot of black and yellow in Nashville last week. Every week when I make these picks, I'm like, I might go 4-0 with these picks. And I don't know that I very rarely have, but I'm fortunate to go 4-0 this past week.
I think this might have been your first 4-0 all year, but you've had a lot of 3-1s. If you have had a 4-0 this year, I think I also had a 4-0 in the same week, because I remember us like when having really good weeks together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you went undefeated all year.
Yeah, picked a good time to start, I guess.
Definitely not good for me. We only picked playoff games, which we've already kind of reviewed those games. So if you don't have anything to say about those, we can jump in. So with the semifinal games, there's only 2 games. Drew asked me today if I wanted to just pick a favorite or an underdog and an over or an under. I don't think it's possible for me to win if we do it that way, so I wanted to keep the 4 games up, so there might be like a couple weird ones in here. So my favorite to start it off, I'm going Notre Dame as a 1.5 point favorite versus Penn State. I think Notre Dame is putting it all together at the right time. I think this is where Penn State's falling in a big game. I think this is where it finally happens for them.
I guess this is where we only have 2 games to pick from. We're going to flip-flop each other. So I went Ohio State minus 5.5 over Texas.
Yeah, I guess that is going to be the opposite, because I took Texas 5 plus 5.5 versus Ohio State. I don't know that Texas is going to win, and Ohio State looks really good right now. But I think Texas can at least keep it close. Maybe it'll go into overtime and just be like a 2-point win.
Yeah. This is part of the reason I asked, did you just want to do 2 picks? Because I was leaning towards Notre Dame winning this game. Penn State's been playing very well recently, but I ordinarily would not have picked Penn State as the underdog here.
Yeah, and I probably, if it wasn't for the restraints of our contest, probably wouldn't have taken this Texas game. I think Ohio State is going to win that game, but I just kind of had to because I picked the other one. It's just whichever one you thought was more confident in your favorite. That's what we're doing. So hopefully we have differing unders and overs, because I picked how Vegas sees it happening. I picked my over being Ohio State, Texas, which is plus 53.5. And I guess that's a spoiler that my under is Notre Dame, Penn State. That over underline is 44.5.
Yep, we flip-flopped. So I went for my over Notre Dame, Penn State over 44.5, and my under is Ohio State, Texas under 53.5.
So there's big opportunity for point swings here, which is good for me because I'm down 3 points right now, or 4 technically only 2 with the preseason picks, but Drew still has the Ohio State in there. So opportunity for big point swings. Are you still okay with how this is looking? Like, are you still okay with doing it like this?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, then yeah, I think that's all of our picks for the week. We're going head to head on every matchup, so should be fun.
Unless I lose, and then I won't be happy with it.
I think even if I catch up this week, you'll probably still win in the end, and it'll just make it more interesting for the listener.
All about the marketing. All right, we got 2 more semifinal games before the national championship, and it's kind of weird. 2 semifinal games on 2 different weeknight days. So we're recording this on, is this Wednesday? We're recording this on Wednesday. So the first one will be on Thursday, Notre Dame versus Penn State in Miami. Fighting Irish, 1.5 favorite, over under set at 45.5. Key players to watch for in this matchup is Penn State's tight end Tyler Warren, who's been instrumental in their offensive success, and Notre Dame's opportunistic defense known for creating turnovers. What direction are you leaning in this game, Matthew?
So based off of our picks, I'm leaning towards Notre Dame here. I think this is the closer of the 2 matchups, though, and Vegas agrees because that's only a 1.5 point line. So this one I think is going to be exciting, but Notre Dame showed us last week that if they put it all together, it's going to be dominating and a long night for Penn State.
Yeah, I'm rooting for an Ohio State Notre Dame national championship. Kind of going back to a comment I made earlier about everybody being up in arms about the lack of SEC teams in it. If you look at the 4 teams that are left, Texas, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and then you throw Penn State in there, 4 historic blue blood type football programs that Penn State and Texas really have been a non-factor in playoffs, other outside of the playoff last year with Texas. Notre Dame was always one and done in playoffs. So you got some perennial programs here you'd have to think viewership is going to be way up this year with these teams in it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking about how the 12-team playoff has brought new matchups and just parity in college football. It sounds like that if you haven't been watching football for the past 10 or 15 years. Because if you fell asleep in 2005 and woke up today and we were like, oh, it's a 12-team playoff now and no more BCS, these are the teams, they would be like, oh, yeah, obviously. These are the biggest programs, especially if you factor in NIL. These are some of the biggest budget programs in the league. It's a possibility that the playoff could look like this for a while.
Mm-hmm. And then the second matchup this Friday night, the Cotton Bowl, at AT&T Stadium there in Arlington, Texas. Ohio State's a 5.5 point favorite, over under at 53.5. Both teams with high-powered offense, setting the stage for an explosive encounter. Ohio State's dynamic passing game will challenge Texas's defense, while the Longhorns aim to leverage their balanced attack to keep pace.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was mentioning in our picks segment, is that I think Ohio State is going to score on Texas. The story of this game is going to come from whether Texas can score on Ohio State. So Texas has athletes all across the field on offense. Ohio State hasn't seen anything quite like that this year. Could be a good one. I think I'm still leaning towards Ohio State there, even though I picked Texas as my underdog.
I'm leaning Ohio State. Wouldn't necessarily prefer for them to win. Not a big Ohio State fan, but I think they're going to win this one. And another reason why I went with Texas as my underdog is this is kind of a glorified home game for Texas. This is just a couple hours away in Dallas, and Ohio State obviously traveling probably 7 to 8 hours to get there. Yeah, I saw a graphic. Every other playoff team has to travel between 1,000 and 1,300 miles. And Texas has to travel about 200.
Wow.
But I think that's it. Next week, we'll have the national championship to preview. We'll have a better idea of what the pick'em contest will look like, if Matthew gains some ground or if I pull away even more. Join us next week when we'll talk some ball. Peace.
Peace.